Okay, so this is going to be a tutorial demonstrating how to use one of the 960.js sites templates to create a basically a wireframe mock-up of how to arrange elements in a site. 960 grid system is really wonderful. It's in terms of it allows you to build boxes and columns based on the commonly used width, 960 pixels, which this site probably is, which would make sense, though we're not going to read this. Let's see. Nah, you can't read it. Let's put it over there. Can you read it? 92732. Yeah, it's probably wouldn't surprise me. Anyway, so we're going to download the templates, show them in the Finder. It generates a directory that's filled with a bunch of pieces. It's kind of nice to look at the code, actually. We're going to start with by looking at the 12-column set of grids. All right, so you can see each column in pink is 60 pixels, and each column has a margin of 10 pixels. So this gutter is a combined margin from the column on the right and the column on the left. So in a sense, the gutter, as it's called, in between is 20 pixels. And so the gutter that's horizontal is also based on a margin top of 10 and margin from the box above below. All right, so we keep that in mind. Not that we can't break these rules. And so with the tools, I'm going to show you how to use, there's templates for a variety of applications. I really like to do design in Illustrator. So I'm going to work with the 12-column grid in Illustrator. So you just double click it. It's a .ai file. And this is Illustrator CC, which is part of the Creative Cloud. It's the most current version of Illustrator at the time of this recording. And so by default, we see these gutters, but there's a few things I like to do to make this easier to identify. I'm going to go into the preferences and guides and grid. And I'm going to have a grid line. Every 72 is going to be problematic. It's going to be hard to see. So I want it actually to be every 100 and every subdivision to be every 20 pixels. All right. And then when I go on to turn on, I'm going to say View, Show Grid. When I zoom in, you can see that the grid points match along. If it was every 72, it would be a pain. These bigger lines would not match up so well, and you would have boxes in between, and that would be problematic. I also like to say View Rulers, Show Rulers, so you kind of know where you are. So as you zoom in, it's tough to see in the screen up here, but you know, we can see each pixel number. So this is 40, 50, 60, 70. So we know where we are within the space. And then the last thing I like to do is make sure that Snap to Grid is on. All right, so that as I'm creating these boxes, they're going to match up, or I'm going to be able to easily match them up with various points on the grid. So let's pretend I'm making a grid layout for a typical, say, blog site that has a header. It has a slider with like a recent blog post here, and then some 3 boxes that would have like more posts or a map or something, a third social media icon, and then a footer. And so I'm just going to designate these areas. And then I'll know what spaces, pixel-wise, I'm designing to when I start to try to build this, all right? And keep that in mind. So I'm going to work with the rectangle tool here, and I'm going to change this to black with a no stroke, all right? So there's no line around the edge. And so I can work, and I can draw a box, all right? And I can zoom in and immediately I can just adjust. I can make sure, and you can see visibly I can see the width of the box. All right now it's at 225, but I can make sure, I want to make sure I leave that 20 pixels. So this is where it's good. Each of these represents, and if you can see it right here, this is 20 pixels right here. So I know that I'm at 0, 20 pixels down, but each box represents 5 pixels, so 5, 10, 20, so it's easy to recognize. And I could come across, and I'm going to make sure it's 220 wide, and let's make sure this is going to be, say, an area that's a space for maybe a logo, all right? Command 0 to center this whole thing up. And I can just copy and paste that and go back to the move tool, all right, and bring this over. And I could say, oh, maybe it's going to be just one pixel wide. And then I could come all the way across, and this might be where I'm gonna fit my navigation. I can see that I'm a little off, right? I'm 5 pixels off, so I can move this up, all right? And it's snapping that grid. Snap to grid is what allows this to move so readily from 5 pixel increments, okay? And so now what's kind of important to recognize is when I click on each of these boxes, I can look at the I can look at the info above and see the sizes of them. So this one's 220 by 80. This one is 700 by 80. All right. So and then I know that based on my gutter is based on this 10 and 10 or 5 and 5. So this is a total of 10, and this is 5 right here plus the additional space after that. And then I could just, for me, it's kind of easier to just, I can say copy paste, and then I can take another box, and now I'm thinking, okay, this is where, and I can see I've kind of kept, I have to make sure I keep my spacing. Oh, these are 10, so sorry, let's move this down to 4. So we have, these are 20 pixels, sorry, these are little boxes. So 5, 10, 15, 20. 5, 10, 15, 20, all right? And I can choose to not make this so wide, all right? And I can, let's say we'll make this, that looks pretty good for maybe a slider, right? Maybe I can make it a little taller. 300, 620 by 300. And I'll copy and paste that. And bring this over. And now I have this, I'll zoom in, make sure that it matches up. And that we can see is this one is 620 by 300, and this is a perfect square of 300 by 300. All right. And so then I could take these 300 by 300s, copy, paste, and arrange them below. And you can start to see I have this kind of bloggy looking interface starting to grow out of here. And then finally I might have my footer, right? Count again, 5, 10, 15, 20. Maybe I don't want this to be so tall. It's a really narrow footer. There's not much going on in this thing. So I'm going to only make it like, say, 40 pixels tall, right? And now I have this kind of space. And I now know when I can click on each space and I can know if this is the grid system I want to work with for this kind of fairly traditional blog space, where there's like a logo or search bar, navigation in a search bar, like all our main links, a slider, some sort of featured item, and then 3 more subsetted secondary featured items, and a footer. And then that's good. I can now turn off, when I have the layers palette open, if you haven't seen it, the layers palette open in Illustrator, by default, it was putting these 2 layers are locked, so we have the guides, so I can turn those off, and the columns, and I can turn those off. And then finally, if I want to, I can toggle the grid on and off. It's Command quote. So I can even turn off the grid if I want to see it. And now I can say, okay, there's my grid system for this particular site piece of design. And so we have this kind of dominant area, and there's no color, there's no bothering with design, and we can define this is the dominant area of like the big picture that people are going to look at when they come to the site, followed by some text, and then they'll maybe look at the navigation, or they'll see these secondary areas like recent tweets or whatever have you. It's up to you. And what I want you to do is then we can just save this export, save for web. And we have this nice little piece, all right? And it's saved, in this case, we'll just save it as a GIF. It's literally one color because it's the black and transparency. And we save, and then we can call this my blog mockup. All right, and we'll put this on the desktop and save it. And we can open this thing, all right? And we have a mockup. All right, it's not centered because we don't have any centers, but we can measure it, and it's probably about 960 pixels. So that's a quick way to do a grid-based mockup. And we'll stop right there.